Well, I wouldn't normally do videos from my car, but on the way to the day job, I have not been at testing at the beginning of this week. Something really interesting has come up on the Mercedes, and lots of talk on social media straight away about this setup. And what we can see is Lewis Hamilton on the straights, as he straightens his car up, pulling the steering wheel back, and then before braking you can see him pushing the steering wheel back forwards. Very unusual. Obviously there shouldn't be play in the steering backwards and forwards, but what we've noticed, and obviously again this has come up very much on social media, just not me picking up on it, I'm just trying to explain what's going on, is that as you see Hamilton in the Mercedes pull the steering wheel back, you see the front steered wheels actually go like this, turn in very slightly, which is called toe or tracking, what you're probably more used to in your road car. So what we're finding is that as he goes onto the straights, he pulls the steering wheel back, and the front wheels, which would normally be slightly towed out by a couple of millimeters each side, will then turn in and be, I presume, almost straight. Now, you have toe out to get better turn into corners. That's how you get a race car to handle. On the straight, that means you've got the drag of the tyres steering slightly. If you turn them straighter, you reduce the physical drag of the wheels along the tarmac, which should give you a little boost in straight line speed. Obviously always important, which with this system therefore you would then guess is that what Mercedes are trying to do is to get the steering performance with toe out on the corners, but then neutral steering on the straight to get more straight line speed, because you don't have the drag of the tyres along the straight. But in addition to this, I think what might be going on, we've spoken a lot about push rod and upright, that as the car steers, the front of the car will drop and rise depending on the steering angle. The more steering, the more the front of the car drops. So in theory, that maybe they have set this up so that on the straights with the change in toe, you actually get a slight raise in front ride height, which knocks out some of the rake in the car, flattens the front wing angles, can also do lots of very clever things like stall the diffuser and what have you, but that's getting way ahead of what may be going on here. And again, the reduction in rake would potentially increase straight line speed as well. So how is this happening? Now, what I think is happening is that the steering wheel is attached to the steering column, which is attached to the steering rack, which then goes out to the wheels. As Hamilton goes onto the straight and pulls it back, you're actually moving the entire assembly backwards, and by moving the position of the steering rack relative to the front wheels, you move it back slightly, and that will actually just bring in by that couple of millimeters the front toe of the front wheels. Really odd and interesting stuff. Then before you go into the braking area, you can push the steering wheel forwards, which obviously under braking would be the natural position that you're pushing against the steering wheel in corners. So it's a safety kind of mechanism here as well, as much as it seems very odd to move the entire steering assembly backwards and forwards around a lap. Then that brings the tyres back into toe out, which gives you the handling for the subsequent corners. Obviously this is a completely manual system, and then there comes the question of illegality. Now, I don't have an opinion whether it's legal or illegal. That is for other people to decide. Lots of people are saying that suspension can't be adjusted while the vehicle is in movement, and the suspension can only react to loads through the car. But we're not talking about the suspension, really. We're talking about the steering, which is a different set of regulations, not 10.2, but instead 10.4 in the rule book. And that says nothing at all about doing a change of steering or toe angle. It just isn't described. It's not something that the rules are there to think about. So potentially, this is within the regulations. You then think, well, hold on, but it is affecting the suspension, because potentially the suspension could be going up and down as well as towing in and out. But of course, the suspension has to react to steering in terms of toe and in terms of steer angle. So again, it's not something that the regulations have really encountered and have thought about. But you know, I think everyone's looking at this, both the fans, I'm sure the rival teams, the FIA and Mercedes, I'm sure must have spoken about this beforehand, talking about a system like this. But of course, when you talk off-season about technology like this, when you see the final implementation, the FIA could take a different view. Mercedes may find that it isn't the advantage that they thought they had from simulation. Again, legality, totally open question. I'm not going to debate about that, but there are arguments both for and against, depending on your point of view. So really interesting stuff coming up already from testing.